Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Dauphney and I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And my co-host today is Regina Fitzpatrick, our genealogy librarian. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today for attending our first ever panel discussion related to genealogy. And we'll go through a brief introduction of everybody. So we have Catherine Medich, who is a reference archivist at the New Jersey State Archives. We have John Bozard as well from the New Jersey State Archives, and he's a library assistant. We have Bonnie Beth Elwell, the library director of the Camden County Historical Society. We have Melissa Johnson, who is a certified genealogist and founder and head of Johnson Genealogy Services, LLC. And lastly, we have Michelle Tucker Trubenko, who is the Eastern European specialist with Legacy Tree Genealogists. So again, everybody, both attendees and panelists, thank you for joining us today. We'll go over some housekeeping items before we jump into the action. If you have any questions, please submit them using the questions box in the GoToWebinar dashboard, or you can email me directly. My email is on the screen. It is adauphinee@njstatelib.org. And for the purposes of this event, we ask that you please limit to 2 questions only. If we have extra time at the end, we'll let you know when you can ask more questions, but please, so that everybody can get their questions answered, we ask you please limit to 2 questions. There will be a survey at the end of this, so if you could please complete that, we would all greatly appreciate it. We really want to know what your feedback is, and that'll help us, going forward in what we do. If you're looking for more things genealogy, and really all things related to genealogy, Regina has created a fantastic research guide available at the web address on the screen. And we'll make sure that everybody who is in attendance today gets a direct link to that, so you can visit that at your leisure. There are wonderful handouts and guides there. There's presentations, there's links to a lot of different things. So please, at your leisure, please take a look at that and take advantage of all the wonderful work Regina has done in curating that. So for those of you who may not be familiar with GoToWebinar, this is what your dashboard should look like. If you do not see this dashboard, look for this orange box with a white arrow, either at the top left or right-hand side of your screen. That will close the dashboard, and it's possible the dashboard loaded closed when GoToWebinar launched. Additionally, if you can't find this, look for this blue clover type icon for GoToWebinar in the bottom part of your screen, probably on your taskbar. If you're working in another program, GoToWebinar will work behind it, so you can just click on that icon. That'll bring up my screen that I'm sharing, the web cameras, as well as the dashboard. If you have any problems, can't figure anything out, and you're running into issues, use this raise hand button here, and I will get in contact with you directly and hopefully be able to solve any of the technical issues that you're having. And as I said, if you have any questions, and right now we're limiting it to 2 per person, please submit them using this question box here. Just type in your question, hit send, that'll get sent to us, and then we'll take care of it. So I'd like to start off, and we have a few scripted questions that we'll be asking the panelists to kind of get the ball rolling, and then the second half of the discussion will be open to the floor for Q&A. So if everybody is ready to go, we can start with the first one. Very simple, and tell us who you are and what you do. So Catherine, why don't you lead us off?
Okay, I am the head of reference at the New Jersey State Archives. Currently, I work on answering telephone calls and emails with general research questions, and also coordinate responding to all of your lovely reference requests.
All right, Melissa?
Melissa Johnson. I'm a certified genealogist. I work professionally taking clients. Most of my clients are cases that are difficult New Jersey research problems. I also do some New York City research as well. I do some British research depending on the area in England, and then also work with DNA for adoptees and those with unknown parentage, and also incorporating DNA into those more difficult research cases. And I also operate New Jersey Family History Institute, which runs courses, usually 1 to 5 day courses on different genealogy topics.
Great. Bonnie?
Hi, I'm Bonnie Beth Elwell, and please pardon my webcam is frozen. I work as the research librarian at the Camden County Historical Society, where I assist patrons with researching history or genealogy. That's my day job. But in addition to that, I also serve as the vice president of programming for the Genealogical Society of Salem County. There, I plan genealogy programs, though we've been light during COVID. A third thing I do is I also manage the museum and archives at a museum in Elmer, and serve on the board of some other historical organizations as well.
Great. Michelle, you're next.
All right, Michelle Chabenko. I am a professional genealogist who works remotely for Legacy Tree Genealogists, a company based in Salt Lake City. As stated, I'm an Eastern European specialist, so anything basically Germany down to Austria, Slovenia, and East is my territory in Europe. And I basically take those tough, hard projects in Imperial Russia, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or Germany, Prussia as well. So it's, that is my day job. And sometimes I do get to work on my personal genealogy.
All right. And John, rounding us out.
I'm John Bozard. I'm a library assistant at the New Jersey State Archives. Ever since COVID, I'm basically transcribing tax ratables records that are eventually going to go up online, and answering requests for Civil War research.
Yay.
Great. All right, we'll move on to the next question. And Regina, you can do this one.
Okay. John, since you ended, we're going to start with you. What sort of records or research materials do you normally work with?
Well, of course, as I stated, the Civil War records. Back in normal times, Civil War, as the requests come in or people come in to do research, and then basically vital records, wills. It's been so long, I'm forgetting. What am I forgetting?
What about
I guess that's about it.
Deeds.
Yeah, deeds.
My deeds. Good.
Yes.
I used to work at the archives, everybody, so I'm gonna rag them a little bit.
Careful, careful.
Yeah, I know. You guys have all the dirt on me. Michelle, same question for you.
Okay, my favorite records and what I work with a lot are metrical records, or what we consider sacramental church records here in the US, for locations in Poland, Ukraine, Russia, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia, you name the country, the modern successor country, along with cadastral maps and the surviving directories that go with those maps to ascertain land ownership and land maintenance for those former empires that ruled Europe.
Great. And Bonnie, same question for you.
So in our library, I work a lot with records such as the city directories that we have for Camden from 1839 to the 1940s. Basically, that era is what we have a lot of information about. We have city directories, we have cemetery records for the local cemeteries in Camden. We have maps that show details of property owners in Camden City and Camden County. And we also have naturalization records for those in Camden. Another thing we use a lot is the newspapers. We recently digitized our newspapers from 1876 to present. So that has opened up a wealth of resources right here in our library.
Wonderful. And Melissa, same question for you.
Sure. So it kind of depends on the time period I'm working in. I do a lot of colonial New Jersey research, and that involves looking at anywhere from Supreme Court records, sometimes church records, a lot of wills, land transactions. And then, some projects that I work on that are unknown parentage or misattributed paternity that's more recent, I may be looking more at recent vital records, divorce records, getting adoption or non-identifying information from adoption agencies. And then another thing too, it's, I wouldn't call it research material, but it is a source and a record, is DNA test results. So that's just as important now in the genealogy discipline. We consider it, genealogists consider that to be another source, just like a will or a deed. Now it's something that needs to be consulted if it's relevant to your project.
Awesome. And finally, Ms. Catherine.
I work exclusively with records created by a government. So that runs the gamut from vital statistics, wills, deeds, court records. I primarily coordinate the production of responses to requests, often through our website. And also I do an awful lot of work with people who are doing dual citizenship. So they need certified copies of records, of vital records, naturalizations, divorce decrees, which is also kind of interesting.
All right, great. We'll move on to our next question. All right, what services do you or your organization offer for genealogical research? And then we'll start with Catherine and work our way back down.
We have an extensive website that you can order various vital records from. We own historical records, so they are from May 1848 to 1919 for births, marriages and deaths from the same starting date to 1930. Primarily, that's the main thing. And we will answer more detailed questions via email. Our hands are somewhat tied in the fact that we are still closed to the public for certain areas. People want some court records that are stored off site that we don't have the ability to get currently. Next.
Anything to add, John, since you work at the same place?
Civil War records, we have maps.
Yeah, but we don't search them.
Oh yeah, we don't, sorry, we don't search by mail. So pretty much what Catherine said then. We're having too much fun.
Yes, we are.
All right, Melissa.
So as a professional genealogist, I offer, obviously research services, but I also do a lot of consults with people. If someone has, research that they've done and they might want me to look over it and see if there's, other records that need to be consulted, if their conclusions are sound. And then I also, take on some DNA cases where people are just looking for some help. So that's more of a consult as well. But I do research projects, projects that are smaller, 4 or 5 hours, and then larger projects that are up to a couple hundred hours. And then through New Jersey Family History Institute, we offer courses. So for example, we ran a New Jersey practicum over the summer that was 4 weeks. Students got the opportunity to work on 3 difficult research cases throughout the week, and then we went over the resolutions for those cases as a group when they were done. This weekend, we're running a 3-day course on genealogical writing, and all of our courses are recorded and available for 90 days after, so that if people can't attend in person, they can, revisit those lectures or whatever they missed afterwards. So that's services as far as a professional genealogist and through the educational opportunities through the FHI.
Great, thank you. Bonnie?
So at the Camden County Historical Society, we are usually open to the public 4 days a week. We are not currently due to COVID, But normally we do have visitors come in and research in our library during that time. But for those who live out of the area and for those during COVID, we do also offer research requests where a researcher can submit a request for an hour of research or for one specific item, and we'll look it up and send it to them. And that information is on our website. In addition to that, at Camden, at the Genealogical Society, where I serve on the board, we offer monthly programs of genealogy lectures that either have some aspect of New Jersey history or some aspect of how to research that we usually offer once a month. We haven't begun redoing that since COVID happened, but hopefully in the future we'll start doing something online as well.
Okay, great. And Michelle.
Okay, as a professional genealogist with Legacy Tree Genealogists, we are a full service research firm. The company is based in Salt Lake City. However, it is staffed by over 45 employees. Half of us are not in Utah. I mean, I'm here in Central Jersey. Our slogan is we do the research, you enjoy the discoveries. Our projects include narrative style reports with the supporting documents, research history, etc. They could be traditional research, meaning, find my grandfather, or, DNA analysis and research. We also offer travel, or what we call heritage plans, for those that have, ancestry not in their own backyard, and offer, similar to Melissa, we have a one-on-one consultation service that we have offered through several of our expert researchers at the company.
All right, thank you so much. We'll move on to the next one, and you can take it, Regina.
Okay. Awesome. This will be a fun one, and I personally would be down in the vault at the archives with a laptop provided by Ms. Viv, locked in there with my deeds. That's what I love, the early land record deeds personally, but I would love to hear from our panelists. So John, what's your favorite record collection to work with?
Do you want to guess? No, it's kind of redundant. The Civil War stuff is my...
Or muster rolls by congressional?
Well, the regimental records, the muster rolls by congressional district, you're getting information about the person, their age, name, where they came from in most cases. But the regimental records, there's a variety. It's one of those collections where you don't know exactly what you're going to find, and there's different records for each person, sometimes not very much. If your soldier was in the militia, you don't get a lot. I just did a militia letter, and they're only getting 2 pieces back. But it's interesting. There's all kinds of stuff in there. I mean, it's 100 and some boxes of records.
Yeah, and it's awesome for historical researchers too, not just genealogists. Anyone with an interest, passion for Civil War can learn so much for those records. Like going through the regimental records, I learned that the men in the regiment voted on their non-commissioned officers, and I was like,
yes.
Whoa! Like you learn cool stuff like that. And day-to-day. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and there's a couple regiments. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's a couple regiments where if you really want to get into the, say, office work of the regiment, we've got the records for the ammunition ordered, some of the artillery units, how many shells they had at a time, lists of some of the horses and things. So it's really a varied collection that if you sit down and go through it, you just don't know what you're going to find.
Yes, very cool. And Michelle, what's your favorite record collection to work with?
Oh, how to choose. I kind of echo Melissa, like we get to work on so many different projects that we have a lot of favorites. I mean, number one, everything at the New Jersey State Archives and library are fun and exciting to work with, and always produce good and interesting gems of information. But I have to say, what I'm currently working on using the cadastral maps of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we're currently transcribing those directories or surname or individual indexes so that you can actually locate the your ancestral homestead, because currently, it's a little hard to correlate the cadastral maps that may be digitized to the your house, which you have a house number in your church records, but they don't exactly correlate to the house number on a map. So we're transcribing the directories and creating a collection that will be hosted by the Polish Genealogical Society based in Warsaw, hopefully sometime in early 20.
Oh, and who's my next victim? I think it's Bonnie. Bonnie, what is your favorite collection to work with?
I have to echo what you said and say deeds. I love working with deeds. And for years, it usually had been if I had a day off from work, I would be at the county clerk's office searching through deeds in one county or another. Well, I was very excited this year when I discovered that Family Search had digitized a lot of the deeds online. So when COVID started, I spent all those hours at home on my kitchen table looking on Family Search and going through deeds for the last several hundred years and just having a grand old time. So I very much enjoy doing deed research, and I'm glad to have a number of them available online for free now in a way that frees me up to be able to research more with them and not just during business hours when I'm off work. We also, of course, have deeds here in our Historical Society archive, a couple of thousand that are another wonderful resource just here looking at the originals.
Excellent. Bonnie, as a follow-up, how have you found it to be when I look at the deeds on Family Search, a lot of them are part of the browsable image collection.
Yeah.
Do you find that kind of like a barrier for getting into the deeds, or do you think it's still pretty accessible, pretty nice?
So I actually did something to make that more accessible. Originally, to me, it wasn't too much of a barrier because of the fact that I already was familiar with working with the original deed book. So I already knew the indexing system and how to navigate what would otherwise be a very unwieldy system. But because this was now available online and I wanted to allow a broader number of researchers to access it, I actually created a chart, a form for how to use the indexes, how to access it, because normally it would be a bit beyond most, everyday kitchen table researchers kind of thing. But I did create a form that's on our website that covers all the South Jersey counties and how to use the index and how to navigate through the image-only database.
Oh, that's awesome. Could you email me the link, and that's something you can send out to participants,
Sure.
or particularly if they're working in
I think actually I sent a link to Andrew initially to our website, the Camden County Historical Society Archives website. It's at the bottom of that page.
Awesome. Great. Melissa, what is your favorite collection to work with?
So I kind of have two. I love divorce records. I know we talked a little bit about that before, but I really like records that give a glimpse into the ancestor or relative's life a little bit, especially if they led a more interesting or scandalous life. So divorce records are definitely great for that because they tell you a little bit about the person, sometimes some of the bad stuff, which also sometimes you have to take with a grain of salt because it is a divorce and people lie about things. And then to that same effect, I kind of also, as a second favorite to me, are some of the USCIS, like the citizenship records, specifically like the alien registration files and the visa or registry files that can tell you a little bit more about the immigration story, maybe sometimes back up some family lore. So those are really interesting as well.
Oh, excellent. And for the divorces, because of course in New Jersey, the divorces go back well into the 19th century and even past that. Do you have a favorite time period you like working with?
The ones that I have found to be the most interesting are kind of, I would say, like 1910s to 1950s, I would say. I think divorce was not so common then, but when it was happening, it was usually a juicy story. So, and we are very lucky in New Jersey that they're open. So they're open up to the present day. So if your next door neighbor got divorced a couple years ago and you want to get in their business, you can go get their records if you want to. Usually divorces now are by mediation, so it's usually just a couple documents filed with the court. It's not as invasive as they used to be, but that's not every divorce. But ones even from, I found really interesting ones from the 70s and 80s, that and a lot of the unknown parentage cases I've worked on where we suspect that someone was the father, and then there's a divorce for him and his wife because he fathered a child with another woman, and that's all laid out in the divorce. So yeah, other states are not as open. New York, for example, divorces are closed for 100 years.
Oh. And our final victim, Catherine, what is your favorite records collection to work with?
All of them. Newspapers are great fun. I love reading the old newspapers because they're so gossipy. And again, I'm a big divorce fan as well because they burst into the room and the woman's dress was disheveled because they had to prove adultery. Those are the most fun. But I just like answering questions. So each record answers its own question. And then we move on to the next question.
Excellent. Has your, because, you've been working with the state records collections for many, many years, have your favorites changed over time? Like, did you used to have something that you really loved and then, a new records collection has come in and that kind of replaced your old favorite?
Well, I did have a soft spot for the Civil War records, and somebody took that over. And getting more and more of the original vital records has really expanded my interest in them, just to see the change in the record over time, from the one line in the 1848 to 1878 records to the certificates to the more modern certificates that give even more information. So I'd have to go with that.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, and our last question before we open it up, what is your best advice for anyone doing genealogical research, either generally or within your specialty? Catherine, please lead us off.
Don't get caught in the trap of it's only this way. Be creative. Think about how they could misspell something, because they will. They always do. And be open-minded. That's the main thing. Be open-minded, just follow the records and see where it leads you.
Okay, great. Melissa.
I would say to not be a name and date collector. So those are, the vital records are great. They give you a basis of where people lived and where they were born and about how old they were and things like that. But it's really much more interesting to find out about the person's life. So, newspapers, as Catherine mentioned, are a great way to do that, looking into, records that tell you a little bit about the person. And especially if you have older relatives that are still living, to interview them now, because, they'll have those details that aren't going to be on a birth certificate, like a date and a place is going to be.
Great, thanks. Bonnie, what is your advice?
Mine is to also research all of the rest of the family and the rest of the neighbors and so forth. It's amazing how many times like a great nephew from several generations removed, or a second cousin, or a great aunt or something like that will have details about the person you're looking for within their records. So it's to research all the rest of the family at the same time, you can often find a lot more information about those you're looking for by researching the rest of the family.
All right, thank you. Michelle, any advice?
Sure. I guess I'll stick to within my specialty since I do Eastern Europe and I deal with a lot of different foreign languages. My advice to folks is don't let the language be a wall or a barrier to doing your research. There are plenty of ways to get assistance with, translating documents, understanding, most Roman Catholic or records for Europe are in Latin. So if you can read English, you could, do a fair job with Latin and a translation guide. Also, handwriting, it does take getting used to, with the different scripts, such as the German, current script, or if you're dealing with any Cyrillic-based language. But it is, workable. It's just like any researcher based in the U.S. who wants to deal with colonial deeds, particularly those before 1700, and they may be in the secretarial style of script, and it's, your eye just adjusts to it. So give yourself time, and definitely take the shot and work through it. And there are plenty of online groups on Facebook to get assistance, as well as, working with a professional. You can do a lot.
Thanks so much. And John, last but not least.
My advice would be do your homework. By that, I mean, especially if you're coming here, look at our website. We have multiple searchable databases that will lead you into the records. If you do that work at home, you can come in, you're gonna have much more time to do research and the possibility of getting a lot more records. Many people that come in, they haven't looked at our website at all, and then they have to spend a lot of time sitting there looking through the death indexes online or the marriage indexes or the land records. And you can save a lot of time and have more time to research by doing that before you come in. And don't be stuck on how your ancestors or how your name is spelled today, because your ancestors could have done it a different way.
That's what I said.
Well, just as a reinforcement.
Yeah.
And I have a final piece of advice for everybody too that
Yes,
I think
please.
is important and nobody mentioned. When you go and you find your records and you print them out or whatever, or you're naming a file online, make sure you are putting identifying information in the file name, write down the citation, because I know from working at the archives, we had so many people come back with a piece of paper and say to us, what is this? And we couldn't always tell. We might have an idea of what collection it was from, but it will save you tons of extra work and heartache if you very clearly identify the record that you are saving or the record that you printed that you're going to tuck away somewhere, and that's only going to help you in the end. So cite your documents, people, and name your files very clearly with what they are so that you'll know what they are in the future.
Fantastic. All right, that is all of our scripted questions for right now. So we're going to open it up to the attendees to please submit your questions. Again, please limit them to 2 at this point. And if we get to a point where we feel we need more questions to answer, we will let you know. So let's take a look and see what we have. All right. I'm a county archivist for Houston County, Tennessee Archives, and I'm also a professional genealogist. My question is, I'm encouraging genealogists that when the archives open back up to the public, there are going to be many more records that have been processed, indexed, and finding aids completed. Is this also true for the New Jersey State Archives?
In certain ways, yes, and in certain ways, no. Processed on-site records, there aren't going to be many because most of us are working remotely, except today. But our staff is pretty much almost completed and indexed to the May 1848, May 1878 birth records. And as John mentioned briefly, he's been busily working on the indexing of the tax ratables, which are the colonial era, basically the equivalent of the census for New Jersey. They're from 1772 to about the 1820s. They give lists of landowners, which New Jersey has lost its earliest censuses, so the tax ratables serve a very important function in New Jersey history that we don't have any other way.
And for some of them, you can use them to get into DAR or SAR too.
Yes, you can.
On the year and all of that. So
Mhm.
that's, Andrew, could we ask Bonnie, since she's at a historical society, to answer the same question? I think that would be good as well.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Sure, I was thinking about that as well. I know we have been working on organizing our archives better. One of the projects I've particularly been doing is organizing our pamphlet collection, which has been in disarray. A lot of items had not been entered into Past Perfect. The database that we had for it was vastly incomplete. That's one of the things that we have been able to work on during this closure time. I know my coworker has worked on a number of other projects, organizing them and making them more easily accessible, making things more available to the public. So that definitely is happening here in our archives because of our closure time.
All right, great. Do you want to do the next question, Regina?
Yes. I'm sorry, my little screen keeps moving around. I have documents, and this will be for John, I think. I have documents from a New Jersey Civil War enlistee. I have the typed transcript of his participation in Fredericksburg. I would like to donate this to a repository. Would the state archives or the state library be best?
It's specific to the regiment? Did they say?
Specific to
No.
the person.
They didn't say if it's, but your policy is usually if it's not a state government document, are you less likely to take it, or because it's related to a New Jersey soldier, would you accept a donation like that?
We don't usually.
It depends if it's an original record.
Yeah.
If it is discharge paper or the paperwork that was generated at the time of his service, yes, we probably would be interested in that. We've taken in records like that. But if it's a typed transcription of records that are available, say in Washington, D.C., probably not.
Okay, that's good to know. And
All right.
Bonnie, do you have any information about, types of, is your organization accepting donations right now, and what kind of donations are you taking?
Yeah, so we donate, we accept donations of things relating to Camden County. And that's true for the other historical societies where I work at. So for instance, I'm also on the board of the Salem County Historical Society. If it was something having to do with a Salem County soldier, that would be something that we'd be interested in receiving. Same with if it was a Camden County soldier, it'd be something that our Camden County Historical Society would be interested in receiving.
All right.
And could I ask the professional genealogist, has anybody ever come to you with original materials, and is part of your services kind of helping direct them as to where to donate things or what to do with the older documents? Might be relevant to their case.
I've definitely helped people with like home archiving projects, not necessarily documents that belong in an archive, but old family records that they wanted to keep. I haven't encountered anyone that really wanted to give them up. They wanted to keep them in their family, but they wanted to make sure they were well preserved and organized and cared for and things like that.
I would echo what Melissa, I just finished and actually mailed off a Gaylord box full of organize folders and everything. So I've done the organization, but again, client, wants to retain ownership. So, beyond, without knowing which county the residents, it's hard to say, but any of the county historical societies, I think, would be absolutely interested in obtaining material like that.
All right, thank you. Next question, we'll start with Bonnie. What African American collections do you house?
Well, so we do have a good collection of African American history in our archives. We do have a variety of they're kind of like directories, biographical directories where they include biographies of local people. One of the projects I worked on actually somewhat earlier this year during COVID was indexing them because they weren't well indexed. So we have that database that includes biographies of people from mostly the 1800s and 1900s. As you go back further in time in the 1700s and so forth, early 1800s, we do have publications in our archives that include slave documents, which also include manumissions, also include birth records, etc., of people of African American descent. We also have a variety of genealogies that have been published of some of the local families of the area. And another resource that I've used a bit is our tax ratables, which of course also lists free people of color, etc. at the end of the list sometimes, or just various times where you can go through and see details of the lives of early African Americans in our area. Of course, our newspapers are full of information as well, and there's a lot of other resources in our archives that include African American history.
All right, John and Catherine.
We have a small collection of records from United States colored troops, which are up on our website.
Yes,
Yeah,
some of them are, not
yes.
the muster rolls.
Yes, part of it is up on our website. We also have slave births from
A few from a few counties and a few manumissions as well. But most of our African American records are interspersed with everyone else's records.
Yeah.
There are deeds when they're purchasing property, vital records, births and deaths. Very few that are specifically African American collections.
All right. Michelle, even though you're Eastern European, have you dealt with any African American specific collections in your research?
No, I can say that I don't get those type of projects, number one. But I do, modern Ukraine and modern Europe has a lot of, Africa to those countries. So it's not we do see that in the modern projects, going back in that direction, but I really don't have a lot of experience with U.S. enslaved ancestry.
Okay. And Melissa, have you had any experience with specifically African American collections?
Very limited. I've worked on a couple of cases where kind of the family was in New Jersey and traced them back elsewhere. They were traced back to different southern states, and I've done a little bit of research there, but it's not something that I would say is my area of expertise. So I don't think I can contribute too much to this question, unfortunately.
I would recommend, since I didn't hear anybody mention it and it is digitized online, it's not a specific collection to African Americans. However, the published New Jersey Archives series, the extracts from American newspapers about New Jersey, is excellent. And there are tons of ads in there for either people who were escaping from enslavement or indentured servitude. There are runaway ads with detailed physical descriptions. Sometimes you will get advertisements where they will specifically mention sales of enslaved people, things of that nature. There was allegedly, right after the 1733 New York rebellion of enslaved people in 1734, there was
got sent last week.
There was allegedly one in Somerset County, New Jersey, and there's an article in there that describes that. So I would recommend that published resource. It was published pre-copyright law, so it is digitized online and you can access it. Again, it's called Extracts from American Newspaper Related to New Jersey, and I would highly recommend looking at that, particularly if you're dealing with African American ancestors who you know went back to the colonial era.
Okay, thank you.
Regina?
Yeah.
Regina? I just wanted to mention one other thing because I do also serve on the board of the Salem County Historical Society. I have been working on creating some indexes of early African American records from the colonial time period and pre-1850 and prior. So there are a number of resources at the Salem County Historical Society and that are in process of being collected on that specific topic.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Bonnie. Do you know when those are going to be available online? Do you have any ideas or time frame?
I would say generally time frame would be in a year or so. not right away.
Okay, but that's awesome. Still great.
You want to do the next question?
Yes, I can do this, and I'm going to put this one to Ms. Catherine, since she will know all of the weird, more obscure military collection.
Yes.
Is there a series of military records for the Quasi-War of 1799 to 1800? That's different from the whiskey.
Yeah, the Whiskey Rebellion, 1793. They're published in Stryker's miscellaneous wars book that includes the War of 1812, but really we only have like 1/2 cubic foot box of Whiskey Rebellion, and there might be some mixed in for Quasi-War of that time frame, but not much more.
You know what the Quasi-War is? I'm not even sure what it is.
I think it's probably a continuation of the Whiskey Rebellion, but I do not know with certainty.
It was essentially a fake war between the United States and France, whereas they kind of like threatened war on each other, but there was no actual like battles fought or anything, but it was more.
Okay.
It's always useful to have an American history master's degree holder around. Especially in panel discussions like this.
Is anybody familiar with quasi-war records, if you've come across them in your research? All right.
There are some muster rolls or petitions, related to the Cheetah, which was a British ship, in our militia records. Yes, we're all ready to go fight against the Cheetah, but I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Alrighty. I think this is for Catherine, John, and Bonnie, but certainly we'll have Michelle and Melissa give their 2 cents on this. Do you have census records? And I'd say for Michelle and Melissa, maybe where you've gone to get census records, if there's anything that you want to add. So Bonnie, can you start us off?
Is that us phrasing?
No. All right. We'll go with Catherine and John.
Actually, I am going to defer to Michelle Chabenko on this one because she's written a whole article on our New Jersey state censuses.
All righty. Well, speaking in regards to New Jersey state enumerations versus the federal enumerations. Our collection here at the State Archives, which, you know, they resides downstairs, or actually, yeah, it is downstairs. You know, we have the first enactment of the state census for New Jersey occurred in 1855. It was, it ran every 10 years on the fives through 1915. The enumerations, 99% of them reside at the State Archives. Hunterdon County retains the originals for theirs for certain year, the 1875, as well as Monmouth County does, but they do have microfilm copies at the archives to use. So it is a, the early enumerations are head of household, but thank goodness by 1885, we at least get every person. And then by 1905, they start to mimic the federal census enumerations. So, you know, that is a very underutilized, I think, resource. People don't know that they could be looking at those in conjunction with federal enumerations, which are on the zeros. You know, as Catherine stated, we do lament the loss of the 1790 through 1820 federal censuses for our state. They are off in who knows where land, and we've officially began in 1830 and obviously come through modern times. And I know microfilm exists at the State Library. The State Archives, you can get that accessible through Family Search, Ancestry, Find My Past, any of the major subscription services, etc. So, you know, we have a wide variety of census records available for New Jersey alone, as well as, you know, don't overlook just because New Jersey has a state census. If you're researching elsewhere, you might be surprised that another state has their own. There are quite a few that have that.
And just so everybody knows, at this point, if you look at ProQuest's website, Ancestry has extended for Ancestry Library remote access. So all you need is your public library card through the end of this year. So through December 31st, 2020, you can get access to Ancestry Library Edition from home via your local public library. So that's something awesome. And like Michelle said, all the federal censuses are up there, and the New Jersey state censuses have all been posted up there, 1855 to 1915. It's really great. And I have a follow-up question for Michelle and Melissa. What about people who are now going back to the old country or somewhere else? What is your experience dealing with non-US census records? And, you know, is it pretty common in other countries to have a census? And how are they a little bit different?
It really depends on the country. So, you know, so there are some countries that did census enumerations and, you know, may not have called them a census, but they did something similar and they did it more often. You know, one example that probably won't apply to most people here, but I'm working on a case in American Samoa, and they had a 1910, 1912, 1916. So that's great. And then you have some, you know, countries that don't have anything resembling a census, and some that have something that's kind of like a census, but they don't call it that. So it really just kind of depends on where you're working. But it's definitely something to look into. If you can, you know, read the Family Search Wiki or look at a research guide for that area and kind of get a feel for what they do and don't have, that's a great approach so that you know what's out there.
I echo Melissa's advice of, you know, obviously using the Family Search Wiki to determine, you know, under, you know, for foreign locations, look under the census topic. To speak specifically for certain countries, the old provinces of the German Empire, so pre-unification, there are large collections of censuses for these provinces or duchies. You also have, for the Russian Empire, you have the revision lists, which are, you know, similar to a census that you can utilize. They began in the 1790s and ran through the late 1850s, and then they have military conscriptment lists in the 1870s. So the Austrian Empire, unfortunately, due to wars, we have lost some of the more modern enumerations. However, the newest discovery that was just put online was the 1921 census of Czechoslovakia. So depending on location, you just never know what you can have available to you.
Should we throw in about 1890?
All right, should I ask the next one, Andrew?
I just a follow up to the quasi-war question. Some people might have some strategies or information. Apparently, the New Jersey had a fort in Plainfield, New Jersey, regarding this, and the land was actually purchased by the U.S. government. This person is researching men who are stationed at that fort. So if you have any ideas of where to look or some strategies, they would appreciate that.
Well, if it was purchased by the United States, those would be federal records. That'd be the National Archives.
Okay. Yeah, Regina, you can go on to the next question.
Okay. So this question says, what is the most difficult to find information that you found in a seemingly obscure record? And how did you find it? And who's going? I'm going to turn this over to the professional genealogist, because I'm sure you've both worked with so many different records and so many different repositories. Were you ever chasing something down that you found in a really unusual place and you had to dig for it? And how did you come across it? What was your detective work process?
I don't know that I can think of a specific record I was looking for and I found it in a weird place, but there's certain archives I've gone to that are not very well organized or that don't have a lot of their materials processed, and there's just kind of boxes of random stuff, and I think even the people who work there don't really know what's in their collections. So I found some really interesting materials. One place would be the New York City archives years and years ago, before they were a little bit more they had their materials a little more processed, but things like collections of traffic tickets that are completely disorganized, you just have to kind of go through them and see if anything is of interest. And then a lot of smaller archives and historical societies, a lot of local libraries too. The Irvington Public Library probably has the best local history collection I've ever been to, but you wouldn't even know that it was there. It's not advertised on their website. They have all kinds of things in there. They have family Bibles. They have like actual artifacts of different, commemorative mugs and people's war medals and things like that, just tossed in a filing cabinet. So those are places I would say, I wasn't looking for something specific, but I found some really interesting things.
Okay, well, I don't know, obscure and weird locations or not. I would say, we do run across a lot, as Melissa said, that, unprocessed material where you open the box and you're like, wonder what's in here. But what I see in Europe is that a lot of records aren't where you expect them to be. So you have to always keep an open mind, not only to, as John said, how to spell your last name, but also where those records may be for your ancestral location. There are plenty of local museums that have church records that truly you would expect to be in a civil or diocesan archive, and they're not. So, I would say that's probably been the most, obscure of learning, like, okay, maybe these records are at the local museum. Let's check with them just in case, kind of, so keeping an open mind for that.
I have one other that I can share. That this was in Pennsylvania, not New Jersey, but it just popped in my head, so I figured I'd share it. I was looking into court records for a murder that happened in my own family. So this was in the county's records, and they had suggested that I look at the police records, which were held separately. So I went to go do that, and I was given a box that had like the police investigative files in it. So I thought I was gonna be looking at, papers. And I opened the box, and there's a plastic bag with the gun gun that was used in the crime in the box that they just handed to me. So that was something I would say is definitely unexpected. But I guess I was looking at the police file, which I guess included all the evidence too. It just wasn't something that I thought they would just hand to me, but I guess they didn't really look in the box either. Otherwise, I'm sure they wouldn't have just handed it to me. So that was interesting.
And for our people who are working in repositories, I'm going to twist this question slightly. What are some collections in your repository that people might not think to check when they're looking for information or genealogical information? Where can you find that stuff that you might not necessarily expect? And I will let John and Catherine go first on this one.
Well, there's a state prison.
True.
You can find sometimes very interesting and sometimes very sad things in it. The tax ratables can help with relationships sometimes, because you'll have a father who have X number of acres of land, and then the next ratable he's got less, and there are two people with the same surname right below him, that the acreage adds up to what it had been. Anything else? Oh, the muster rolls by congressional district.
True.
For the Civil War. They have if it was a substitute, who the person is substituting for, which is really kind of interesting and very obscure.
Very cool. Bonnie, are you able to respond to that question?
Yes, I'm here again.
Okay.
Yes, I'll mention two things. One, we do have police reports in our archives, which are kind of fun. They're from the 1880s, and it goes through and lists each person who's arrested and what they're arrested for. A lot of times it's something like, like playing cards on Sunday or something really innocent like that, swimming on Sunday. Anyway, so those are some of the more unique items in our archives that are kind of fun to work with. But going back to the initial twist of the question, I do just want to share one brief story of how I found one record I was looking for. I was looking for the ancestors of someone who was born in 1780. And I had basically mapped out everyone with a surname in the certain area that he was from, but didn't know which set of parents might be his parents. Well, going back forward in time to not his son, but not his grandson, but his great grandson's baptism record in the early 1900s. I was looking at that record and saw that it gave a middle name for this man, and he was, Silas W. Baker III, but now it gave his middle name as Silas Warner Baker III, which led me to the great-grandfather's great-grandmother's maiden name, and helped solve the solution of the parents of that ancestor. So that took us from the 20th century back to the 18th century with just one record.
Great. All right, next question is, what are the best questions to include when interviewing relatives? Let's see, I will throw this we'll go with Michelle first if you've experienced this.
Okay, so when interviewing, always, my advice would be always make sure that you make an environment that the person feels comfortable in. Ask open-ended questions, not yes or no style, so that you get more of that biographical detail. Pictures are a great segue to conversation and allowing, organic conversation to kind of flourish. You can ask them, questions about, what they remember about the weather, what they wore, maybe did they, how they transportation, because, as you get the person to kind of open up about certain details, that's how, you know, kind of unlocks the other memories that are kind of attached to it. So, you know, always record, because you just never know where the person's going to go. It's generally never, ever in a straight line. So always record your session, be it just, you know, using your cell phone and the recording. It doesn't have to be video. It could just be audio if the, you know, creates less pressure for the person. So those would be my pieces of advice for that.
Bonnie, do you have any suggestions?
I actually have not done any interviewing myself, so I've been able to benefit from some excellent interviews. So I'll leave that for other people who had more experience.
Sure. John, Catherine?
Well, we're usually trying to tease information from people that don't think they know anything, but they actually do, by how old were you when this might have happened? How old was your sibling? You know, they're come in and say, I don't know when my parents got married. And you have to try to figure out when it happened by that sort of an interview, the reference interview. We don't do the this is what was happening in the family type of an interview.
Melissa?
I know I kind of alluded to this before, but I would say think about things you're not going to find in a record. So, you know, ask, you know, what people were like, ask what their immigration experience was like, ask, you know, things that you're not going to find in a record, like where they were born or, you know, what someone's birth date was. And then also think about, you know, asking about other relatives. So if you know your grandmother had brothers, you know, obviously you want to know about those brothers, but ask, you know, did your mom have any cousins? Especially if you're trying to trace farther back and trace down other lines of the family, you know, knowing that your mom had a cousin named Sally who came to visit from Poland or something like that would be really helpful, you know, in identifying the right families in Poland. And then, you know, of course, always record, like Michelle said, record, write things down. Don't think that you're going to remember them 20 years later.
Actually, relating to that, I have one thing to add, and that would be to transcribe the interview, not just record it, but then transcribe it. Technology changes a lot. If you might have done it with an 8-track way back then, or with a cassette, or with a VHS, and those technologies are all harder to access now. And then, of course, what we have recorded on computers might then be hard to access in the future. So if you transcribe it, it makes it more accessible for the future.
All right, thank you. Regina?
All right. Our next question, again, I think it's going to be directed more towards the professional genealogist, although if anybody has any personal recommendations, do feel free to chime in. The question is, I am thinking of paying someone to work on my family tree. Are there reputable organizations that I could contact for recommendation?
I would say to look in some of the directories. So there are lots of directories of professional genealogists. The Genealogical Society of New Jersey has one, the Association of Professional Genealogists, the Board for Certification of Genealogists, National Archives. So depending on kind of what you're looking for, you know, if you're looking for a researcher in North Carolina, you might want to check the North Carolina State Society to see if they have a researcher list, and then, you know, research the person. Not everyone specializes in everything. So make sure that you're hiring someone that, you know, has expertise in the county or the time period or the religion or ethnic group that you're researching.
I would say ditto. She covered it. All the bases there.
And also, just to note, if you look at the GSNJ, the Genealogical Society of New Jersey professional genealogist listing, underneath the person's name and contact information, it does list their specialties. So that's something useful, and it's not something that I've always seen included in every directory. So that's something really nice.
All right. This one is specifically for Michelle. Researching ancestors from 19th century Lithuania, part of Imperial Russia. I only have the name of the general districts where my ancestors originated, not the town or village. Any suggestions for how to frame the query to the Lithuanian archivist's office?
Well, number one, the records in the Imperial Russia or most Europe, they're categorized by the religious orientation. So you're going to obviously need to identify whether this person is Jewish, Roman Catholic, Lutheran, because this way they can access the correct record set. You know, the other is make sure you're exhausting domestic resources for your individual. Leave no stone unturned to get a particular location within the district that you're looking, you know, that you have already identified for that. So basically, they will most likely a request sent just now using just that basic information will get rejected because they're going to ask, they need a specific town as well as the religion. So it sounds like more homework is needed to be completed before sending that off.
Thank you. Regina.
Yep. So for our repository people, and I'm sure this is something that everyone is dying to know, any idea when we're reopening? And what can we do in the meantime? What do we have access to right now? I'll add that on. And I'll let Ms. Catherine and John go first, and then we'll ask Bonnie the same thing.
We have no knowledge of when we will reopen. We are following the directives of the governor. So that is where we are with that. The website does have a lot of indexing. Unfortunately, then you have to write into us to have us send a copy of it. You can't get instant gratification. Sorry about that. That's about all I have. We've reconfigured the microfilm reading room to make it more COVID friendly with the restrictions, but we've gotten zero information as to when we will be reopening. And if we reopen, it will most likely include making an appointment for the beginning. Bonnie, how about you?
We're about in the same spot. We don't have a definite date for reopening, and when we do reopen, it will be by appointment only. We're sort of following the county library system, but not exactly. They're kind of transitioning at this point, but we do not have a set date for reopening at this time. In the meantime, there are a few resources on our website, such as the deeds on family search that I have a form for how to access on our website. Also on our website are links to other online Camden County resources such as naturalizations after 1930 and a few other items like that. The digitized newspapers are on newspapers.com. Unfortunately, there's no way for us to allow that access for free to our membership. But if anyone does have a newspapers.com subscription or would like to get a 6-month newspaper or a 1-month newspapers.com subscription, that gives them access to a vast amount of information for Camden County online.
Awesome. And I'll just answer for the state library because there were 2 questions about this, and one of them asked about us at the state library in case any of you are curious. We are also, us 3, same boat. We do not know. However, you know, reference staff is still working from home. We are providing programming. As you can see from today, we are here for you to answer your questions. What you have access to from home are any of our research guides, the library catalog, which you can search. That might be particularly useful for people who are looking for family histories. If you do a subject keyword search in our catalog, you can get a complete list of all the books that have a particular surname indexed in them. You sort that list by the publication date. You can figure out which books are pre-copyright. You can Google those and see if you can find them digitized online. So the library catalog is a really fantastic tool for genealogy researchers for creating a book list to potentially find digital copies online. In addition, you have access to the research guides 24/7. If you are a New Jersey resident and you have your public library card, you can access the statewide databases via Jersey Clicks. That includes Heritage Quest, which has the census. But again, you must go through your local public library to access Ancestry Library Edition, not the state library. So that's kind of where we are. Reference staff is here. We're waiting to help you. We miss you. And please reach out to us with any questions you have. And I'm sure it's the same at the archives and at Camden County as well.
And Regina, one
Yes.
other item about the Salem County Genealogical Society. On the Genealogical Society's website, we have a whole list of resources, are links to online South Jersey resources for genealogy. So I sent that link to Andrew, and that also has a number of online free resources for genealogy in South Jersey.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Andrew?
Yep. All right, I don't know who specifically to address this to, so if anybody has any ideas, please feel free to chime in. But what is the best way to track down records from churches that have closed, specifically Presbyterian churches? I am looking for the third Presbyterian church in Trenton, and it doesn't appear in the index on Ancestry.
I can answer that, at least somewhat. Oh, I was going to say the Pennsylvania Historical Society in Philadelphia is one resource that has a lot of Presbyterian records for the whole area, actually for the whole country, and it's located right in Philadelphia. Also, a number of county historical societies have received church records from their local area. So for instance, here at Camden, we have a number of church records, not from that one specifically, of course, but from other local churches that have closed.
I was also going to mention the Presbyterian Historical Society in Philadelphia. And if you're not finding, they have a catalog on their website. If you're not finding that church in their catalog, you might call them and see if they have any additional information, because another church may have like merged or taken over that church, and the records might be with that other church and not with the Historical Society. So the Historical Society a couple of years ago put most of their records on Ancestry. So most of what they have as far as what people think are genealogically relevant records, like the baptisms and membership records and marriages, are online on Ancestry. But if they got the records after that, or if they're with a church that didn't want to have them, filmed for that project, they might know where you can find them. If you're not finding that information on the website, definitely try calling.
All right, Regina?
Okay, excellent. And Melissa, this one is going to be for you, since you have literally taught classes on this, I know, but anyone else can feel free to chime in with their experience as well. I know it's a big subject, but how do you integrate DNA genealogical research into traditional genealogical research?
That's a good question. It kind of depends on the project you're working on. So, for a lot of projects, DNA can provide a clue. If you have like an unknown ancestor or a brick wall ancestor, and you have a bunch of people who share DNA that descend from that person, you can look at their shared matches and see if they match a cluster of people that comes from a certain family. And that means you probably come from that family too. If you're working on a case where you have sort of an idea of what your next generation is, breaking through that brick wall, and you have documentary records, but not necessarily, a case that you would consider, a solid one, adding DNA to that can also help. So, what you want to look at are not ethnicity estimates. Those are not going to be important for, something like this, but, basically looking at who you match and clusters of matches. And if you can cluster a certain group that descends from a certain ancestral couple and you think you also descend from that couple, that's something that you can integrate along with your records. And DNA evidence is just as important as a deed or a will or any other documentary source, and sometimes it can often conflict with those documentary sources as well and provide information that's more accurate than those. So hopefully that helps to answer the question a little bit.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right. This was somewhat covered before, but they're just looking for some clarification. Where would someone access prison or police records? So Catherine, John, we'll start with you.
It really depends on the municipality and the prison. We only hold records for the state prison at Trenton because a former guard was very interested in the history and kept the volumes. But we don't have anything for, say, the Mercer County Correctional Institution or the Essex County County Jail. It all depends on the institution.
Bonnie, I know that you mentioned
Yeah,
this.
I'll second that it depends on the institution. We have some police reports in our archives, like I mentioned. One set is from the 1880s and another set is from the early 1900s. But the difficulty is that we only have them because a certain, I think it was an employee who was, they were being thrown out and donated them, or it might have been a dumpster diving kind of situation where they were not being kept. They just happened to be rescued from the trash and brought here. So we have what we have, and what we don't have doesn't exist. In Salem County, I know that I believe it's the sheriff's department still has some of their old prison and arrest books that they've had on display at different events. It's not an official archives as far as it's not something open to the public, but they do have them still owned by their office.
Melissa?
I would, probably echo what was said. I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add on this one, unfortunately. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And somebody commented, at least the Plainfield Public Library local history department has the Plainfield police logs. So.
Okay.
Is there, and this is just a follow-up question from me, and it probably varies from collection to collection. What kind of information can you potentially find in a police report versus a prison record?
Well, a prison record will have more of a physical description of the prisoner, why he was convicted, and how long he was there. Sorry, Melissa.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to say basically the same thing, but then that a police record, might have a little bit more detail of like the actual crime and maybe like a witness statement or the officer's statement of what they observed or what happened at the time of the arrest. That's kind of what I've seen in the past. So you may get a little bit more detail there about the specifics of the crime.
Thank you. Should I ask the next one, Andrew?
Yeah, the naturalization one.
Okay. And this is a good one, as you know, in New Jersey, many of us have immigrant ancestors, so this is always something useful to know. How can you find out where someone's naturalization record is stored? Are they recorded by county, by court, district, and are they always in the state of residency?
I
The
can
quick answer is
that one.
yes.
I was going to say it depends on the time period, somewhat. So, you know, a little bit earlier on, there were more courts where people could have been naturalized. You know, there were some courts that it was more likely, but there were a couple different courts that did naturalizations. But, you know, if it's a little bit later, a more recent naturalization, you know, it's usually either the federal district court or the county court of common pleas. And, you know, for a while there, people had kind of an option of where they would naturalize. So if you think about sort of what was easiest for them, like based on the county that they lived in. So, you know, for a while, people who lived in, say, Newark or Camden, you know, they had both options. They had their local county court and they had a federal district court. So it's really kind of up in the air. It could be either or. But, you know, if you're looking at someone in another county, kind of think about how far they would have had to travel to go to one versus another. And if they lived in, say, like Cumberland County or something like that, it's probably more likely that they did the naturalization in the county court of common pleas rather than traveling so far to get to a federal district court. But it is good to check both, especially because they may have lived somewhere else previously. They might have filed a declaration, declaration of intention previously and then not followed through on it in a court. And you might have good information on that. So, and then earlier on, you know, just it depends on the time period, but there were a couple of courts. Maybe Catherine can take that one on the more specific courts in earlier New Jersey time periods.
Yeah, the very earliest, like the 1830s, you could be naturalized in Chancery Court, you could be naturalized by the Supreme Court, you could be naturalized by the Prerogative Court. Prerogative Court is the weird one in New Jersey in that it is the court that was like the appellate court for when you probated a will. The primary place that you find naturalizations, as Melissa said, are the Court of Common Pleas. Early pre-1906 naturalizations give you limited biographical information. They don't give you the wonderful thing of, I was born on this town and I came over on this ship. That shows up in the records after September 1906. Additionally, what you were talking about with the U.S. District Court and the Court of Common Pleas, the Court of Common Pleas basically get out of the business of naturalizing in Camden, Trenton, and Newark by about 1930-31. It's not a hard stop, but that's approximate. So we have some counties records, some counties don't, and some counties still have theirs. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to mention that we do have here at the Camden County Historical Society, we have the 1844 to 1933 naturalization records here, or on microfilm, that is, but we have them.
Wonderful. I'm going to be a little obnoxious and ask Michelle, since you know you deal specifically in Eastern European. Do you kind of have a sense, or is there kind of like a clear narrative out there of the Eastern Europeans' immigration experience to the United States? Are there any specific strategies you might recommend if you're searching for somebody's naturalization? And do you have a sense of how likely, you know, that particular population group was to naturalize? Were they more likely just to reside in the United States and maybe not naturalize at all? Were they one of those groups that made frequent trips back and forth home and to the United States, that kind of thing? Or is that just a varied part of the immigrant experience?
Yes to all of the above. Basically, I mean, as with any immigrant population, be it Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, or such, the act of naturalization depended on the person. There were plenty of people who were birds of passage, meaning they went back and forth a lot, a few times, maybe just twice. So, you will find, that in the passenger manifests, if you find your person more than once, don't be surprised. They may be, they may have been that shepherd that brought the people from their home, ancestral village, ancestral town back and forth because they knew the process, learned English and was able to do that. Naturalization, tips, basically US Census is your friend. 1900 through 1930 are your key censuses that give you immigration detail to kind of narrow down a time frame A of immigration as well as naturalization. Don't overlook military registration. World War I draft cards are very helpful for identifying in between, especially, in conjunction with New Jersey State Census. The 1915 is very helpful because it can, really break up, a 10-year search versus a 5-year search or such. So don't overlook places you can get detail on when the immigrant may have naturalized. Some, basic strategies could be also utilizing the USCIS genealogy search. Currently, their price increase has been stayed, so it's still $65 to get an index search completed. I recommend doing that because you just never know if they have just a citizenship file. They may have a visa file if they arrived after 1924, in later part of 1924 or later. You just never know. And keep in mind, I mean, particularly, for those that are in North Jersey, they may have, if they've worked in New York City, you might find things occurring across the Hudson. So, don't limit yourself to certain geographic boundaries. Do kind of broaden that scope, on it.
Excellent. And Melissa, I know you have a lot of experience in this area as well. Do you have anything to add?
Sorry, I hit the mute button. I don't know that I can add much to that. I think Michelle covered mostly all of that. She has a lot more experience in that area than I do. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And am I missing any additional questions, Andrew? I don't see any more.
No, we still have a little bit of time, so if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to submit them. I'd like to open this up quickly to the panelists. Is there anything else that you've come across that you'd like just to share an experience, maybe talking about things has prompted something that you recall, or if there's any other just general advice you'd like to give out?
General advice. I'll go first. Put me in front of a mic. I'm a Jersey girl. I like to talk. It's okay. Number one, if you're doing research, join your local society. Support their efforts, be it on a county level or even a town level. Don't overlook the resources of membership as well as what collections they may hold. I see a lot of that in the Facebook queries that we see. A lot of people don't look to what's already out there to the society. So, definitely look to an established society for assistance, and, not only with collections, but maybe member meetings that are virtual today because, we can't have in-person events like that in New Jersey. So.
Well, since everybody knows I love to talk about DNA, I'll make another DNA. One thing I would encourage people to do is look at your DNA matches, not your ethnicity estimates. Ethnicity estimates are fun, but they're, not typically as genealogically relevant as the matches. And, look at your matches and see if there's something that doesn't line up with your documentary tree. So a lot of people are finding when they take a DNA test that they have all these matches to a certain family that they never heard of, and they have no matches to their grandfather's family or their great-grandfather's family. And if that's the case, there's probably something in your tree, your well-documented tree, that's not quite right. And this is happening to a lot of people. I would say most people that take a DNA test result have some kind of result that is unexpected in some way, shape, or form. And it could be 2-3 generations back, but it's a good way to check your research. So use your DNA to kind of check your documentary tree and make sure, okay, if I'm saying this guy is my great grandfather, do I have DNA matches to his siblings' descendants? If so, then, and the DNA matches are in line with, what you'd expect in terms of organs for that match, then you can probably confirm that guy as your great grandfather. But make sure that there's a genetic connection to what's in your tree. And if there's not, then it looks like you have some more research to do.
Wonderful, especially with Prime Day is today, and they've got the 23andMe kits on sale. So I'm sure that is going to drive some business your way. Do you find that those of you who are doing, or anybody, I guess, do you find that after like Amazon Prime Day or the holidays when people are buying the kits, like you see a little bit of a
February, March, right after Christmas, people get them for gifts. There's a whole lot of matches coming in. So yeah, I didn't see 23andMe for Prime Day, but I did see Ancestry was $49.99 too. So yeah, both of those are good. I would recommend probably Ancestry over 23andMe just because it has a larger database, but either one is, definitely better than doing nothing.
Yeah. Melissa, when I finally cave and I do it, your email is going to be like on my speed thing. What is this? I remember what you said in class.
A follow-up to that, Melissa, somebody asked, using that DNA, how far back do you think you can go?
That's a good question. It kind of depends. Generally, as a rule of thumb, DNA will give you matches that go back about 6 or so generations on your tree. However, I have DNA matches that go back farther than that. So it really just kind of depends. The way the DNA makes its way down to you is very random. So you could have a good representation of, say, your 6th great grandmother and a really, poor representation of your 4th great grandfather's DNA. So that's why it's great to test not just yourself, but your siblings, if your parents are alive, if you have first cousins, second cousins, alive second cousins or half first cousins are great people to test because then you can use the shared matches tool and identify match clusters. But generally, it's about 6 generations or so for the autosomal DNA tests.
Do you want me to ask the next follow-up, Andrew?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to skip one question and ask the second because it's also related to DNA, Melissa. Which of the DNA databases are the most robust for African Americans who are descendants of enslaved people?
I would say probably Ancestry is going to be the best. I know, a lot of the ethnicity estimates are more broken down for Ancestry. For African ethnicities, they break them down into, different regional groups and things like that a little bit better than other companies do. But also generally Ancestry is better because there are more people. So I think they're up to about 20 million or so was about the last number that I had heard. Whereas some of the other companies have, 5 million. And that might sound like a lot. 5 million is a lot compared to where we were a couple years ago. But, the key with DNA test results is matching. So you want to be in the database that has the most amount of people because then you have the most amount of matches. But Ancestry also does a better job on their ethnicity estimates for African American as well.
Excellent. Do you want me to ask the lady's first question, Andrew?
Sure.
Or okay. I'm going to direct this to our repository folks. The lady does not say specifically where in New Jersey her family came to, so maybe some South Jersey information would be good on this topic. But the question is, my African-American family migrated from South Carolina to New Jersey in the early to mid 1910s or 1920s. What are the best resources for information to trace our family history? And she said that her family came to Trenton specifically. The migrants included my great-grandmother and 4 of her 7 children. So I think we will start with the state archives for that.
Well, the censuses would be a great resource to see who's where, when, especially with you've got 1915, 1910, 1920, 1930. Trenton also has city directories. Those would be at the state library or the Trentoniana collection at the Trenton Public Library. And then, of course, vital records. Who married who, birth records, things like that. If and when we ever decide to open up again, we would be a great resource for that type of research. And don't forget, there are also many instances that birth records appear by the maiden name of the mother, that they're born out of wedlock. So don't necessarily discount that you can't find a birth record if it's not under the name you expect. My great-grandparents almost had my grandfather one day. Well, he was born one day after they got married. So it happens a lot. Bonnie?
For that time period, I would agree with what you said. I would point them to the state archives just because those vital statistics, those vital records are going to have so much detail for, where they were coming from, and the city directories and censuses. The other thing I would mention is newspapers. The newspapers might have information as well that give more details. And of course, obituaries as well may include more of the family story. In our archives, this won't help for Trenton, but in our archives, I mentioned that we have a number of biographical collections of early African Americans of the area. Some of them I think are more like covering all of South Jersey rather than just Camden, but they particularly focus on that early 1900s time period, so they can be very helpful for, this is specific to African American research. These are like, for instance, prominent Black Americans of South Jersey, something like that. So those can be great tools if there happens to be one for that area.
I'd like to add that many times with African Americans who were maybe formerly enslaved, they escaped, or their families were split. They might have taken out wanted ads looking for information on other family members or other slaves that have maybe been sold somewhere else. So there is a website, informationwanted.org, is a great collection of essentially information wanted ads that really relate to former slaves. And they are currently gathering a lot of these ads. They're working hard and they're using a lot of volunteers to help transcribe the ads. So definitely take a look. If you know some specific names and some locations, you can do some general searching on informationwanted.org, and that might be able to point you in another direction too. Maybe even tracing it back farther than South Carolina, or specifically in places in South Carolina. So.
Anything else, Andrew?
I was just going to go on to the next question.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there was another one. Go ahead.
So I recently went through my great-grandfather's documents and re-sparked my interest in his service record when he served as a Marine on 2 ships of the Great White Fleet, which was 1907 to 1909. I think that was that Dewey, I think, when he went over to Asia, if I'm not mistaken. Anyone have any experience researching the individual ship records for that time? I have not yet sent for his records, and how long would that take?
Well, the records at that point are federal, so you'd have to contact the National Archives. We wouldn't have anything here if the person lived in New Jersey. I'm not sure what their turnaround time is for research at this point. I think, you know, at regular times it was about a month or two, but it could be longer at this point.
Right. Regina, do you have any questions that you would like to ask while we get towards the end of our session?
Yes, so I have kind of a wrap-up question, but anybody who's still on, please continue asking questions. I wanted to ask everyone, you know, the kind of an elephant in the room as to why we're all here, why you can see my kitchen behind me, is we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And, you know, it's been life-altering for all of us. For those of you who work in a repository, how has this, what has this pandemic changed in terms of how you're offering services, how your collections are changing, how you are trying to still make things accessible? And for the professional genealogist, how has this affected your ability to go out and do research? What has changed in the services you offer, and how do you get around, you know, closed offices and things like that? So for this, I'll ask Bonnie first.
Yes, so of course it has changed quite a bit because we are closed to the public. However, in some ways it hasn't changed a whole lot on the other hand, because of the fact that basically what the staff is doing now is what we would do on a slow day. We don't have any researchers here in public, but we're spending the time organizing the archives, and we're spending the time doing research requests, which we normally did provide anyway, just only for people out of the area. Instead, we're doing that all the time. This has meant that we've had more time to work on outstanding projects, so that has been, you know, nice as far as that goes. Unfortunately, our regular patrons who are usually here several times a week or several a day, et cetera, are not able to benefit in the same way that they're used to. So I think it has been very difficult for our patrons, but as far as our staff goes, it has provided extra time to work on those outstanding projects.
It's really excellent. And have you found that you've had more times and more energy to work on, you know, more digital initiatives? Is there a stronger push within your organization to make more available digitally? We have no idea when we'll be back in person.
We have done that somewhat, not as much as we probably should have been doing, but we have done that somewhat, you know, focusing on including things in our, well, I send out a monthly e-newsletter with history events throughout the county, and a number of those are now online and so forth. But what it has also provided is, with less events on the evenings and the weekends, it has allowed more time for me to work on independent projects, and putting those independent projects online, and working on the more neglected individual research for other areas as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Michelle, you're going to be my next victim. How has this wonderful global pandemic changed your professional life? Has it changed much? And what are some of your workaround strategies to kind of getting into records that you would normally have access to a la carte?
I would say the pandemic has really brought, actually our businesses increased due to the pandemic. We are busier than ever. Currently my project load is booked out through June of next year based on, the project hours, etc. So it is busier for us. What has changed, obviously, is being able to accomplish and get to records with the National Archives being closed, with the Social Security Administration not processing SS5 requests, with our dear state archives closed and only limited to mail reference services. A lot of records are basically out of reach and have no workarounds. There are no workarounds to getting to federal records. There are no workarounds to getting to vital records that are on microfilm. Well, we can order them through the Department of Health, but they're, currently, I think they said they're, 18 weeks out, on things. And it's a bitter pill to take that, things that are basically should be readily available, and they are on microfilm at the state archives, but, without them, being reopened, we have to wait those 18 weeks and spend more, expenses are up for us on projects. So, it has been tough to get to certain record sets because of the closures.
And Catherine and John, could you talk about your pandemic experience and how things have changed at the archives, how you're working to make things accessible, and anything else you'd like to add?
We have additional issues in that we cannot allow all the staff to come back. We are limited to individuals who are designated as essential, which currently is 6 or 7 people. So our processing really has not moved forward at all because most of the people who do that are part-time employees who are not allowed into the building. They are working primarily on the databases that we were talking about, the birth indexes. They're also working on World War I unofficial service cards, trying to get them up online. So our additions to our website have not grown, but the back work to grow them is going on. Additionally, we have changed how we process requests. Instead of now mailing everything out because it's difficult to get things out through the Capitol Post Office, we have been emailing records, and that has been very popular with our researchers. So that was good because we were forced to do it. And when you're in the middle of trying to just run through everything that needs to be done, you don't want to experiment. And this forced us to experiment, and it's been a happy transition in many ways. Anything else?
Yeah, well, we're just, once everything is worked out, Vivian does her thing, we're gonna have a lot more stuff up online, like as Catherine mentioned earlier, the 1848 to 78 marriages. Births, sorry. I keep thinking marriages, but the births, and then, the tax ratables, they're gonna be linked with the images down the road, so you'll be able to look at them online. They've been scanned, so they're actually going to be easier to read than if you've been in here looking at the microfilms that we have that are terrible. So the scanned images will be up there. So, there'll be a lot more content up on our website.
Wonderful. And to close out, Melissa, how has your COVID genealogy experience been?
Like Michelle said, I have found that people are definitely more interested and are wanting to hire professional genealogists. However, we have to give them realistic expectations of when we can complete their projects. So I have, a lot of people who are on waiting lists right now because I can't really even so much start without having to get into a repository. I have people whose projects started prior to COVID that, I had done some of the legwork and, we're still waiting on records. And And, you know, some of our projects, I've tried to prioritize some of the DNA projects and the writing projects, things that don't require a repository, and get those, you know, at least cleared off my plate. And you know, it's really just kind of waiting and being patient at this point because we can't access what we need to access.
Wonderful. In terms of, you know, you're offering classes as well. Have you increased your online learning offerings or anything like that? Are people seeking out more educational opportunities? Have you found during this time?
Yeah, it's funny. In the beginning, they definitely were. I think people are a little bit like kind of zoomed out by now. So I have seen like a little bit of a drop, I think, because people are doing so much of that. But yeah, definitely we did increase. This fall, we've had a course each month. So we had the August practicum. We had an immigration course in September. October, this weekend, is our writing course. In November, Michelle is teaching a full day seminar in Eastern European research. And then in December, we have our kind of traditional 2-day New Jersey course again. So we did try to increase our offerings this fall, and they've definitely been popular. But you know, I do see some people saying, oh, I really want to take this class, but I'm just, you know, I'm on so many Zoom meetings and so many, and that's part of also why we've made them available for 90 days after the class is over, so that, you know, if you don't have to sit at the computer all weekend and take it now, you get the recordings and you can go through them at your leisure when you're not feeling so overwhelmed with Zoom. So yeah, it's definitely been good. Good for the online learning for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for answering my COVID question. It's certainly interesting to hear everybody's perspective on how the pandemic has changed your services and offerings.
Yes. Well, we are fast approaching the 2 o'clock hour, and I think we can end it here. I'd like to thank my co-host Regina for helping me with this. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, John, Catherine, Bonnie, Melissa, and Michelle. You've provided so many great resources and information. It's definitely it can be a very daunting task, but a very rewarding task, both pursuing genealogy, but also working in these repositories and curating all these collections. So thank you for all the work that you do. And everybody who attended, thank you for taking the time out of your day. I hope you found a lot of this information useful. This will be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube page. So if there's anything you missed, please check that there. And I hope to see you for some of our other programming in the future. So be safe, be well, and again, thank you for everybody for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.